Welcome to the Classical Gabfest, a weekly discussion about the ever-changing world of classical music. I'm your host for this week, William White, and with me as always are Tiffany Liu and Kensho Watanabe. This week we're on a bit of a summer hiatus, so we've got a listener feedback Minisode. But we still like to start with our prelude segment, so Kensho, what do we have today?
This week, we'll be playing a round of everyone's favorite game, Viola Hero. In the world of classical music, the viola is often overlooked and maligned, the red-headed stepchild of the strings section. With this game, we seek to bring awareness to the irreplaceable value of the viola in well-known orchestral works. Here's how we will play. I will name a category of symphonic repertoire, and then play for you a few bars of just the viola part from a famous work. I have my trusty viola with me, and my co-hosts, along with all of you at home, will try to identify the piece after hearing the excerpt. So this week, there will be three categories, the first of which are Prokofiev symphonies.
Ooh, interesting.
Womp womp.
Okay, well, if it's the first or the fifth, I have a swinging shot at it, but...
Otherwise, it's like, yo.
There's seven, if it's...
Which is not great odds.
2 and 3 and 4 are practically unknown. The 6th and the 7th, some people know, but I'm not really one of them, so... Really hoping you give us something we can deal with here.
Oh boy, good luck.
Well, let's see. We have a very tonal melody, almost entirely diatonic, I would say. Tiffany, do you agree?
I think so, and it might even. I think so. A flat was the opening and the end note there. So I don't know whether that. It actually did sound like it was, because you mentioned it was diatonic. It might even actually have been in A flat major.
Yeah, I think that this is the first symphony. I think this is the slow movement. The one that has a little dun dun. Dun dun da dee yun dun. It's the right tempo for that, and just the fact that it is tonal. So the first movement, for people who don't know, is called the Classical Symphony, and it's it's Prokofiev's chance to look back at the music of Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven. And so when I hear a diatonic melody, I think it's probably not one of his more experimental later works. I'm guessing that this is when he's looking back at earlier music, going for something more simple. Although whether I could not fit that in my mental flow, what Kensho just played.
Me neither. And unless my pitch is like really off today, like if that's A flat, there's no way, right? Because D is the key of the symphony. That movement, the second movement, is in A, so for it to work itself into A flat is like almost impossible, I would think. So I'm gonna, unless my pitch is like really, this would be really embarrassing.
Well, hey, you could tell me that this was in Q sharp.
Q sharp.
Yeah.
Well, let me think. Of the others that we know, I think I kind of know 7 a little bit, and this could be that, but I don't know it well enough to conjure up melodies. I do think that the key kind of possibilities there are better than they are in the D major classical symphony. But you think we can safely eliminate 5?
Yeah, well, think about the slow movement of 5. It's based on the...
It's definitely not that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's like totally the wrong meter, right? The third
right.
is some sort of, it's a 9/8 or something, like it's a triple meter in any case.
Yes, that's right. What other slow music is there in that symphony? There's the first, which is very broad in F major. The third does have that sort of like Island Breezes music in there, but I don't think that this is that. And the fourth movement, it has that big extended bit for the cellos, but then the rest of it is very zippy. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Oh man,
I'm working with very limited information here, so I'm gonna actually stick with my guess just because the best that I can do.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say 7.
Tiffany, you're correct. This is from Prokofiev 7, third movement.
Nice.
Oh, it's the actual melody. Now I'm kind of embarrassed.
Hey, you got it.
I know,
Yeah,
but
well
it's
done.
like it's like obviously the main thing going on. So like if I knew 7, which I was like prepared to say I kind of know it, like I clearly do not. But in any case, I think 7 is surprising in how like not weird it is. It is a little bit, kind of, but it's if I were to come up with a word for it, it would be like childlike.
That's why I think you thought of classical symphony for this
Yes.
well too.
Yeah.
All right, here is the second category, Mozart symphonies.
There's 41 of them. And how many of them do I know well?
The viola part, no less. I mean, like we thought we would do okay with Beethoven symphonies, and we really embarrassed ourselves there. Or I embarrassed
true.
myself. I can't remember what you did.
All I did was play C's on that one, so I can't
Yes.
really blame you for
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
that. I've evolved, guys. I'm trying to be nice about these.
Yeah, I was gonna
playing
say
melody.
Kensho is at least probably trying to play from a symphony that we definitely know. So it's not going to be like symphony number 19.
All right, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's.
Heard a little unintentional A pizzicato, hit a C string in there.
You know what? Yourself.
I just had to throw those in because I have no idea what piece this is.
Okay, well I can narrow it down a little bit. Will that was C major?
That was C major.
Yeah. So we have Linz, Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty comfortable saying it's one of those two because I can't think of any other C major symphonies that really come to mind. So, briskish tempo, probably the end of, and there was a rallentando in there at the end, so I was pretty comfortable saying that this is the end of a movement, probably the first or the fourth movement.
Yeah, I think this must be the Linz because the Jupiter, you have bum, brum, brum. I would recognize the Jupiter. Let me just put it that way.
You think so?
And the last movement we have.
Yeah, I mean that makes more sense. But what I'm trying to think of, what does the end of the first movement of Jupiter actually sound like? Because we did hear a brum, which that gesture is inside.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
The very opening bars of Jupiter.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to like speed through it in my head, and now all I can hear is Kensho playing the viola.
Which one is the Linz? Is that 36?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna go with that.
Which I don't know as well. So
Nor do
even
I.
though I have like, been in the room with it before. I mean, are you locked with Linz, Will?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's go with Linz.
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh,
It is
all right.
Linz. Very good.
Yay.
I like this bandwagon
is-
thing. It's a very smart way to play.
Yeah, this is right at the end of the first movement of Linz. Last and certainly not least, the third category, special for Will, is Bruckner symphonies.
Oh, give me a break.
Well, okay, Will. I'll tell you what key it's in, but I can't. You're done. I'm done
I don't know
after
what
that.
key those stupid symphonies are in. All right, let's hear it.
Oh, I'm going to enjoy this so much, actually.
It's just going to be like 5 minutes of tremolo on
Tremolo.
one note.
Again, I have changed. I'm a better person.
I think I can narrow it down somewhere between 1 and 9.
That's excellent. Excellent start.
Tiff, you got anything here?
I don't have anything. I'm sorry. I like really, slow lyrical. We're gonna call the key. I mean, it starts in, it starts on E flat, but the key I think is A flat major. Yeah, where does that leave us? I'm not even really sure, like literally at all.
Me neither. Random number generator. I'm going 5.
I am going 7.
Locking in?
Locking in.
Uh-huh.
See, I'm being nice, and I think that if you were to know me, you would pick which symphony, Will?
Oh, what's that one that you like? Is it the 8th?
I feel so loved right now. Tiffany is right with Bruckner's 7.
Wow.
Well done, Tiffany.
I needed you. The only way I would have had a chance with this would have been if you would play dee da dee da dee dee da dee da dee da dee da.
Just for you, Will.
Yeah.
Well played. That just about does it for this week's Prelude segment, but before we wrap up, we'd like to remind our listeners that we do periodic, listener-generated Name That Tune rounds, so we invite you to try and stump us. Check our show notes, where you'll find a link to the forum where you can upload a 30-second unidentified piece of classical music for us to try and identify. And with that, we move on to our listener feedback. Tiffany.
Okay, GabFest listeners. You've been listening to us for the past 44 weeks, and now it's time for us to listen to you. We've received a ton of feedback so far, so we won't be able to get to everything, but rest assured we do see it all. We'll respond to everything via email or social media, if not actually on the podcast. Thanks again to everyone who's written in, and please, listeners, if you have feedback for us, whether it's something we got right, something we got wrong, topic or guest suggestions, or anything else, please email them to us at classicalgabfest@gmail.com or find us on social media. Let's go to Kensho for our first piece of feedback today.
All right, so we received a lovely love letter from listener Christopher, and here we go. We've broken this up into multiple sections because we love it so much. Hello, Tiffany, Will, and Kensho. Firstly, I absolutely love listening to your podcast. The topics are always really interesting, and the games are so fun. And how could I not mention the perfect group dynamic you guys have? Excellent hosts. Insert applause from a full COVID-free concert hall. Love that. This is the best part of my week every week. I'm a first-year grad student. A good podcast comes in handy for both my lab work and for cooking meals back at my apartment.
Yeah, I think we should stop right there. This is already amazing.
Yeah, you two have the perfect dynamic.
I'm glad that we are accompanying people's meals and culinary creations.
Well, and I think that we should point out here that listener Christopher, has raised his status to listener statistician Christopher because he's been tracking our game wins and losses and keeping the meta score as we go throughout the podcast. So the next time we do an all games round, we'll get an update from listener statistician Chris about where we stand.
Well, that's appropriate because he goes on to say, side note, my favorite game has got to be Stolen Strains. Aside from Never Gonna Fall in Love Again, your theme music, the example of a Stolen Strain that always comes to mind is Lady Gaga's Alejandro quoting Vittorio Monti's Chardas. But it's not quite as clever as the examples Tiffany has been finding. Great job with the choices. Also, another aside, how did you guys not realize the Bach Toccata and Fugue in D minor faster? And Forêt's Pavane? Wow.
Well, let me just say this about that. I think listeners...
Calling us out. I mean, I thought this was a love letter. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think listener statistician Christopher has definitely earned himself a spot playing a game with us. And when he comes on, he can pick whatever game he wants to, and then we'll see.
Yeah, we got to take Christopher through the gauntlet here because it's never as easy as you think.
It's never as easy as you think. And I have to say, Stolen Strains is probably my least favorite game. I just don't like listening to non-classical music. That's the part.
Oh God!
Such a snob.
Yeah.
All right. Christopher continues to write, regarding my first Name That Tune submission, admittedly, the Kevin Putz Symphony No. 2 was a bit of a stretch for you guys, but no worries, I'll be slightly less devious in future submissions. You guys got the composer, barely, which was my goal that time anyway.
Okay, so Christopher here is referring to one of the peak achievements of this podcast.
Yeah, that ended up being one of the shining game moments. Like, please put more. Yeah, don't be less devious. be exactly as devious.
Well, I think he should give us a little bit more credit than saying we barely got it.
The fact that we got
did
it
get
at all is astonishing.
Yeah.
Astonishing. Actually, I wanted to ask you about that, Kensho, because now that you've done this huge Kevin Putz project, do you think that you would be any more likely now to be able to recognize his style with confidence than you were when we played that game however many months ago?
I mean, yes and no, just because the work that I've done so far with Kevin has been a piano reduction of his work. So in terms of the orchestrations and also understanding how he goes about that, I haven't really seen so much.
You've conducted one of his orchestral works. I recall distinctly. I was there playing under your very baton.
It was so funny because I mentioned that to Kevin the first time we talked on the phone in preparation for that project, and his response was, "Oh God, I really hope that I've become a better composer than that since then." So
the piece that put him on the map, really, it's called Millennium
Cannons. It's a great piece. It's just funny that was his reaction to that comment.
Funny. Yeah.
Finally, our last little paragraph from Christopher here says, "Oh yes, I almost forgot. Your review of the LA Phil's Icons on Inspiration. I actually forgot that we covered that already. I had actually watched the full concert a week or two before you discussed it on the podcast. I was impressed, certainly by the programming, and it was exciting to see Julie Andrews and Natalie Portman on Zoom. Yuja Wang's performance/arrangement of the Marquez Danzo No. 2 was cool. However, I agree with you guys. The interviews were shallow and fairly irrelevant, and the selection of celebrities very much catered to the wealthy donors."
Yeah, definitely. That
Spot on.
special was just so vapid.
Yeah. But it's true. We talked about Yuja's performance of the Marquez, and I thought that was really cool.
That was the highlight.
We are in agreement.
Yeah.
Anyways, excellent podcast, folks. Thanks for always ending my week on a high note. Best regards, listener Christopher. Thank you, Christopher.
Thanks,
This
Chris.
is
The
very
best
nice.
the best fan email we've ever gotten.
Yeah,
Bar
for
none.
sure.
All right, well, our next bit of feedback, this is going to take a little bit of explanation. It comes from listener Gabe, and he's responding to our episode number 28, specifically the prelude segment. We did a listening limbo round, and this was a round that I hosted, and one of the categories was the Paganini Caprices.
Oh, right.
Now, this actually generated a lot of feedback from this. We had a text that came in from listener Eric, who didn't know anything about the Paganini Caprices and was shocked. He castigated me for making this around because if Tiffany and Kensho couldn't figure these out, then who in the world could?
Wow.
Well, listener Gabe, who is also a very, very prominent violinist, was one who could figure it out. So listener Gabe writes, "Tiffany sang the wrong slow part to the Paganini Caprice. She was thinking of the wrong one." So a little bit behind the curtains here. This is these prelude segments. They take a lot of editing, and there's a lot of blabber jabber that doesn't make the cut. But it's funny because Tiffany did tell Kensho in the process of the game that he was singing the wrong first section, and it turns out that Kensho was actually singing the right
Was
first
I?
section. Yes, you were right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I've been vindicated. Do I
Yeah.
get extra points for that? Do I end up winning that game now because I got that part
you
right?
Definitely do not.
Let's
You
go
definitely
back.
do
Christopher.
Christopher.
Listen to
No.
Christopher. If you're still listening,
Christopher?
please
Christopher?
fix that.
The
Fix that
record
game. If you
stands.
smudge the numbers a little bit here.
The
We'll be fine.
record
Just
stands.
give me that
There
point.
is-
Give me the win on that one.
There is an asterisk, perhaps, beside the loss, but it is not a win. So anyway, to anybody else who listened and was a Paganini Caprice expert, just know that we are aware.
Sorry, Kensho.
There's a special place in the bad place for people that are Paganini Caprice excerpts, I think. So we'll just go with that.
Okay, let's go on to our next piece of feedback. From listener Jeremy, regarding our 28th episode, he writes, "An entire segment on Charles Villiers Stanford, and no mention of his clarinet repertoire. I guess I should expect this from a trio of string players turned conductors."
Well, A, yes.
Well,
you
yeah.
should.
Yeah. What is a clarinet?
Yeah. B, last time I checked, Charles Villiers Stanford was not exactly known for his clarinet repertoire. I've got a sneaking suspicion that listener Jeremy might be a clarinetist. Perhaps a benighted one.
Fun fact, I played clarinet in 4th grade.
No way.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And then I was introduced to the fact that I have to clean my instrument, and that was it for me. It just wasn't sanitary, I think, and I just didn't. yeah, I just
Well,
couldn't
you
do
should you should have gotten a 3D printed clarinet so that then you could just run it through the dishwasher.
it. Smart. That's what I should do.
Yeah.
Or a U-Gears clarinet. That's the next thing. coming up,
U-Gears
right?
clarinet. Yes, absolutely. All right.
So that Tiffany can put it together again.
Yay.
Alrighty, thank you, Jeremy. Our next bit of feedback comes from listener Tom, and he writes, I enjoy classical music of all periods. The attraction principally stems from my appreciation of the complexity of the compositions and the significant skills required to perform them. Thank you. More importantly, I like how classical music sounds. Discovering an appealing new piece or composer is very rewarding, and I am constantly searching for the next great find.
Well, welcome to the classical mixtape. Hope that we have given you a lot of stuff to listen to. Find that full link in our show notes.
Yeah, I think we've had a nice wide range of pieces
definitely.
that we've been
Definitely.
covering. Personally, I would like to see more diversity in orchestras and many other areas, but while this is evolving, it will take time to accomplish. The fact that inroads are being made should be applauded, but with the complexity and skills involved with classical music, we must be patient. Nevertheless, we need to reach disadvantaged youth to expose them to the world of classical music. And then listener Tom sent us a link to a Classic FM article, actually, about Oxford University decolonizing their music syllabus, which it is a topic that we actually covered on episode 38 when our first ever guest host, Olivia Giovetti, joined us for that discussion on how media can actually spin this all out of control as well.
Yeah, I mean, to summarize that discussion, basically what it turned out is that this article did not accurately portray what was going on. The kind of, after having gone through the ringer of the telephone game here, the article suggested that Oxford was going to do away with sheet music as part of their class materials in teaching music. And of course, that's nowhere near the truth. It's just that they had a staff retreat for the department. They decided that they wanted to foreground more music that is not notated. And, that's what music is. I mean, let's not forget, music is sound. Printed sheet music, notated music is a tool to compose and create sound, but it's not the thing in itself. And so... yeah, I think it was a good thing to comment on. Tiffany, you weren't there for that episode, so I wonder if you have any thoughts on Tom's email here.
I wish I had been present for this conversation, actually, because in my own workplace, we are currently talking about this very issue and the creation of a possible, I think what we're calling a popular music major track, which, may or may not involve knowing how to read music at the end of it, which, I'm obviously of highly conflicted feelings about which side to take. I mean, should somebody be able to get through a music degree in a university and not know how to read music? I feel as if that is not just decolonization, but also we're... Okay, so in the same way that right now composers no longer have to be good at necessarily instruments to be able to compose, right? They have to know a UI with computers. But, is there something lost when a composer doesn't know how to play an instrument? And now, that we're talking about music majors that get through, it feels the same flavor to me.
Yeah, yes and no. I have conflicting thoughts as well, too. I mean, in one way, the problem with allowing a music major to pass through, to earn a degree without learning how to read music is, like you say, you're not just decolonizing, you're almost deculturating. It's like you're removing an important aspect of how music has been transmitted for the past thousands.
Well, is it really linked to culture, or is it just more of a skill? That's the question, I think. And I think it's both. It's
absolutely a skill.
Definitely both.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so we know we have an understanding of the limits of music notation as it exists today and its applicability to other cultures, which I think is the premise of its removing it from the requirement in a music curriculum, which is to say that you can get to be very much of an expert in all sorts of music around the world without the standards of music notation having the slightest applicability to it. That's the point, which I get. We are trying all the time to push the boundaries of notation such that it will encompass things that were not originally meant to be put in notation. So are there hard and fast limits to say, it can never encompass these other kinds of music and it should not be? Is there another written system that can, take the place of that measuring? Because otherwise you have programs that are meant to bestow a standard of understanding that will allow you to traverse the musical world after you have attained that degree. I think that's the point of a degree. So should this be part of it? Obviously an ongoing conversation. Anyway, now that I've made this into a full segment by itself.
Certainly very good food for discussion and thought.
Well, I'm sure we'll come across other examples that will allow us to get more into that conversation. Why don't we keep on going here? Will, why don't you give us our next piece of feedback?
Yeah, our next two pieces of feedback are strong bits of feedback from our discussion of Glenn Gould's How Mozart Became a Bad Composer. No surprise at all that particular segment engendered some interesting discussion here. This first one comes from listener Marcello, who says, "My main reaction is that you all took this way too seriously. Gould was a narcissistic, troubled genius on the spectrum, and I am sure you could probably find similar craziness in things that artists like, say, Dali did or said. Also, on Mozart, he was at his most irreverent and pointlessly provocative, dealing with a universally consecrated icon of music. But if you put this in the context of all his writings and output, you will see that there is an undeniable consistency in his opinions. Only they are to be taken as coming from somebody who sees music, art, and the world through a very distorted lens. The one consideration you made that I totally agree with is, how the hell did this content get to be produced and aired on public television? But if you start digging into what was on TV in the 60s, you would be surprised. They aired some unbelievably cuckoo, surreal, almost psychedelic stuff back then." What do you guys think? Did we take Glenn Gould too seriously?
In what way? I mean, I feel like just because we were lambasting this whole production is, I mean, but this is the thing is that, this was put on TV, and knowing the stature that Glenn Gould has, people would go around and probably say like, well, Glenn Gould said that Mozart is a bad composer, and like had conversations about this. And the type of people that show up to perhaps a pre-concert lecture that then, then say, well, Glenn Gould said that Mozart is a bad composer. What do you think about that? And start that conversation. And be
yes, we've discussed.
Maybe that was the point.
We even have an episode titled after this very type of person. Is more of a comment than a question.
Comment than a question, exactly.
Yeah, and of course, the point that Marcello is making is that that's the kind of person that you would say, yes, that's nice. Next question.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, obviously, I don't disagree with Marcello's comment about the fact that, this is someone that had some, idiosyncrasies to him, and but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't rule out picking apart his argument. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, my big takeaway from that segment really was Kensho's point.
I made a point?
Yeah, you did. It was a first, maybe. That this is really an example of proto-YouTube clickbait. Like this was a YouTube video before YouTube videos, and it's just and it is amazing that it got on public TV. Maybe public TV was the pre-YouTube. I don't know. I think
they were convinced.
Well, what was the pre-YouTube? It's not public TV. It's cable access. Or no. What are they? Public access TV was really the pre-YouTube.
Right.
And I'm surprised that this wasn't on there.
Well, it's Canadian television, so it's not all public.
Right. That's right.
There we go.
Well, actually, possibly, by way of responding to Marcello, I'm going to read another piece of feedback from listener Ellen, which does actually make some interesting points. She writes, "I think Gould was kind of certifiable on some fronts, like he might have been agoraphobic, and he had some weird thing about wearing gloves, as I recall, not to mention the damned humming on his recordings. So, the Mozart detestation isn't entirely out of character. I have a book of his essays, about which I remember very little, but I think I recall that, as with his performances, much of his thinking is really good and much is wacko." Yep. As for how that program about his Mozart detestation ever made it to the air, here's my guess. Gould was, in my humble opinion unjustly, extremely well regarded and attended to back in the 60s. Those of us who are old enough to remember the days when hardly anyone played Bach well on the piano developed a love-hate relationship with Gould. You wanted to listen to his recordings, because you knew that so much could be done on the piano that Bach would have loved to have been able to do. but that the keyboard instruments of his time wouldn't support. And sometimes Gould would come through for you, but often it was quite the opposite. Fortunately, at some point, some wonderful musicians like Andras Schiff and Murray Pariah started putting out pretty comprehensive Bach piano recordings, and you weren't stuck with Gould or a harpsichord or a pianist who seemed to think that they were playing Liszt.
That's actually a really interesting discussion, because I feel like my sense of, music back in the 60s, as I was not lucky enough to be alive then, you had all these like titans of whatever, right? Like just people that were just, so Glenn Gould was the Bach person, or just like put a definitive take on something. And you didn't have these like alternative versions that you could go to, because maybe they were just not as prevalent in terms of the different types of recordings that you could get. And so it kind of goes back to my point in response to Marcello, is that because this person was such a titan of music at that time, that people were inclined to just believe everything they said,
I take slight issue with that, because I think that that's how we read it now, looking through history, because Gould has come down to us as this titan because he's been so canonized and sanctified. But at the time, I think that he was a very controversial figure. I don't think that it was accepted on all corners that he was the end-all be-all of Bach interpretation. And it's just that now that he's become, partially because he became such a cultural figure, which has to do with these cuckoo TV specials that he made, and he sort of created this character of him as the protean intellect, somebody who is beyond just the keyboard interpreter. I mean, he also like talked about like what it meant to live in the north of Canada and all of these, hot takes about composers, and so he set himself up as a major public intellectual, and I think that for that reason, he gets viewed as like the guy in the 60s. You know
what I also think? It's interesting that we've made this connection to like proto YouTube or like proto sensationalist. Like I this idea that he took such a frankly weird approach to Bach is part of why he's ended up being the Bach person. I mean, it's like sometimes how business reviews, like they don't care whether you review them strongly negative or strongly positive. Anything that kind of gets them to the top of the algorithm will do. I think that's what Glenn Gould has done before it was cool.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think that goes very much nicely to maybe perhaps a news segment on Theodor Kurensis and his and his performances.
Boy, good point. Yeah, Theodor Kurensis is in many ways a modern Glenn Gould.
I think he's really interesting. Yeah, I think we should.
I think he's very interesting too. But I mean, you would say the same thing about Glenn Gould.
I'm not putting
a
value on that. I'm just think that if I were to put a equivalency in terms of a figure like that is controversial, it would be Theodor Kurensis.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Let's get into it. Well, that's everything in our mailbag for this week. Let's go to Kensho to wrap it up with our classical mixtape.
In our classical mixtape, we each recommend some music that's caught our ear this week to share with our listeners. So, Will, what do you have this week?
Well, in honor of the Independence Day holiday coming up on July 4th here in the United States, the three of us are recommending some American music, and I thought that I would get the ball rolling with music of a wonderful composer from the early part of the 20th century, died all too young. This is music of Billy Strayhorn, and it's about the least American piece that I could think to put on at least in terms of musical style, to put on this list. This is a recording of his Valse. Beautiful piece, don't you think?
Yeah, I loved it.
And he was such a prodigy. I mean, he wrote the song Lush Life, which is all about this kind of jaded attitude towards, life and society when he was only 17 or 18 years old. It's pretty amazing. He was best known as like the amanuensis of Duke Ellington, but he was a great great composer and arranger and orchestrator himself. So I've always loved that piece. I actually wrote an orchestration of it very early in my career and did it with one of my youth orchestras. It was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Great suggestion. Thanks, Will. Tiffany.
Today I'm bringing us music from Alan Hovhaness, his Symphony No. 2, The Mysterious Mountain, performed here by Leopold Stokowski and his symphony orchestra. There's a hilarious quote on the Wikipedia for this piece, which I kind of want to read. It's by Hovhaness detailing how he came to name the piece, The Mysterious Mountain. He says, Stokowski called me up many times and talked to me about various things he wanted me to write, and he said, does it have an opus number? People like opus numbers. You know how dumb they are. So I said, no, it doesn't have an opus number. I haven't cataloged my work. And he said, well, how would 132, or something like that, I think, how would that be? Do you think that gives you enough room for the things that you've written? And I said, sure, that's okay. I'll start making a catalog. And he said, I like your titles. Give it a title. And so I gave it the title Mysterious Mountain, which I felt was mysterious enough.
That is great. That is classic.
Anyway, it's kind of one of these fun, I won't call him necessarily a hidden gem among American composers, but something kind of in the lineage, I would say, of, Barber, where their style was not like overtly in the Copland mold of Americanism, but certainly becomes, by virtue of it having been written by an American.
I was just going to say that there's something so comforting about the fuzziness of these kind of recordings.
Yeah.
It's just such like a nice, like warm blanket when I hear that.
There's a much more well-known
Fritz
Reiner recording. I think that's more popular, but you're right about this sound and Stokowski in particular. I mean, I really, I haven't gotten the courage to do this yet, but I really want to like pick a piece that I think would work with like the Stokowski freebow philosophy and just say, go to town. Like I really believe in that sound.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tiffany. I am bringing a piece by Samuel Barber entitled Medea's Dance of Vengeance. And this is a piece that I didn't know very well until I had to play it once. I was subbing with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and it was one of those times where I had maybe a day's notice. And so I just kind of quickly crammed my part and then launched myself into this piece. And I just remember sitting in rehearsal that first run through and being like, holy crap, this piece is amazing. Like you just suddenly get like, it's just not the kind of piece that I imagined Barber to write, because my exposure to Barber was much more like Adagio for strings and the violin concerto and Knoxville, and here I was in this kind of Barber's version of Dance of the Seven Veils by Richard Strauss, and so I just remember that feeling of it, and so I love this piece. I am bringing a performance by the St. Louis Symphony and Leonard Slacken. You'll find the links to all these and to our full classical mixtape playlist in the show notes.
And with that, it's time to wrap up this mini-sode of the Classical Gabfest. I'm William White, and on behalf of Tiffany Liu and Kensho Watanabe, I'd like to thank you so much for listening and to encourage you to subscribe and rate us on your podcast app of choice. We'd also love your help spreading the word about the show on social media, where you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can reach us at classicalgabfest@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, happy listening, and we'll be with you next week.